Marcus Wellington stood on the wraparound porch of his sprawling ranch house, watching the dust settle from his morning ride across the property. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly, but he barely felt it. At 34, he commanded a business empire worth over $3 billion, owned more land than some small countries, and had everything money could buy. Yet something deep inside him felt as empty as the vast horizon stretching before his eyes. The sound of a car engine broke through his thoughts. Marcus frowned as he watched a modest sedan making its way up the long gravel driveway. He wasn't expecting anyone, and visitors to his remote ranch were rare. His security team would have called if anyone was coming through the main gate. This car must have used the back entrance that led from the neighboring town. As the vehicle drew closer, Marcus felt something stir in his chest, a mixture of anticipation and dread that he couldn't quite place. The car stopped near the main house, and, for a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out. Marcus gripped the porch railing so hard his knuckles went white. Even from a distance, even after 5 long years, he would know that graceful silhouette anywhere. Jasmine Carter. The woman who had walked out of his life and taken his heart with her, leaving him to build an empire on the ashes of what they once had together. She looked different now. Her natural hair was longer, styled in beautiful locks that fell past her shoulders, and she wore a simple sundress that somehow made her more stunning than any designer gown ever could. But it was her movements that caught his attention. She moved with the careful deliberation of someone carrying precious cargo. That's when he saw them. 3 small figures emerged from the back seat of the car, moving with the boundless energy that only children possess. 2 boys and a girl, all appearing to be around 4 years old. Marcus felt the world tilt on its axis as he got his first clear look at their faces. The boy who came out first had Marcus's dark hair and the same strong jawline that ran in the Wellington family. The second boy shared Marcus's deep-set brown eyes and the way he tilted his head when curious about something. But it was the little girl who nearly brought Marcus to his knees. She had his mother's smile, the same radiant grin that had lit up family photos for generations. "Dear God," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible even to himself. Jasmine must have spotted him on the porch because she straightened her shoulders and began walking toward the house, the 3 children following close behind. As they got closer, Marcus could hear their chatter, innocent questions about the horses they'd seen, excitement about the big house, and one voice that made his heart stop completely. "Mama, is this where our daddy lives?" the little girl asked, her voice carrying clearly in the still air. Jasmine's response was too quiet to hear, but Marcus saw her nod. He watched, frozen in place, as the woman he had never stopped loving approached with children who could only be his own. The years fell away as he remembered their last fight. The words spoken in anger. Her tears as she begged him to choose love over his family's prejudices. His stubborn pride that had convinced him he was right to listen to his father's ultimatum. The sound of her car leaving in the middle of the night while he stood in this same spot, too proud to chase after her and too broken to call her back. He had told himself she would return. That love would bring her home. But days turned to weeks, weeks to months, and months to years. Eventually, Marcus had convinced himself that he was better off without the complications of a relationship that his family would never accept. He had thrown himself into building his business empire, using work to fill the void where his heart used to be. Now she stood at the bottom of his porch steps, more beautiful than ever, with 3 living, breathing reminders of what his pride had cost him. "Hello, Marcus," Jasmine said, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of the moment. Jasmine. Her name felt foreign on his lips after so many years of silence. "These are your children." She said it simply, matter-of-factly, as if she was discussing the weather. "Jaden, Jordan, and Jade. They're 4 years old." The mathematics hit him like a physical blow. 4 years old meant they were born roughly 5 months after she left. She had been pregnant when she walked out of his life, carrying his children, and he had been too much of a fool to go after her. The boy named Jaden stepped forward with the kind of fearless curiosity that Marcus remembered from his own childhood. "Are you really our daddy?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder rather than accusation. Marcus knelt down slowly, bringing himself to eye level with the boy who looked so much like him it was almost frightening. I think I might be, he managed to say, his voice rough with emotion. Jordan, the shyer of the two boys, hung back near his mother's leg, but his eyes never left Marcus's face. It was like looking at himself at that age, cautious, observant, taking in every detail before making a judgment. Jade, however, marched right up to him with the confidence of someone who owned the world. Mama said you have horses, she announced. I want to see them. Despite everything, the shock, the pain, the overwhelming guilt, Marcus found himself smiling. I do have horses, he confirmed. Would you like to meet them? Can we, Mama? All three children turned to Jasmine with hopeful eyes. Jasmine looked at Marcus for a long moment, and he could see the uncertainty in her dark eyes. She was trying to read him, to figure out what kind of reception she would get after all these years. Why don't we talk first? Marcus suggested, standing slowly. Mrs. Henderson can show the children around while we. Mrs. Henderson retired 3 years ago, Jasmine said quietly. I heard about it in town. The fact that she knew about his household staff meant she had been keeping tabs on him somehow. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. Right. Well, Diego can show them the horses if they'd like. Diego Ramirez had been his ranch foreman for over a decade and was wonderful with children. That is, if you're comfortable with that. The children were already bouncing with excitement at the prospect of seeing real horses up close. Jasmine looked at their eager faces and seemed to make a decision. All right, she said. But stay close to Mr. Diego, and do exactly what he tells you. Marcus called for Diego, who appeared within minutes and greeted the children with the kind of warm enthusiasm that made Marcus remember why he trusted the man with everything important in his life. Soon, the three little ones were chattering excitedly as Diego led them toward the stables, leaving Marcus alone with Jasmine for the first time in 5 years. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy between them. Finally, Marcus gestured toward the porch. Would you like some iced tea? Coffee? Water? Water would be nice, Jasmine replied, following him up the steps. Marcus disappeared into the house briefly and returned with 2 glasses of ice water. They sat in the wooden rocking chairs that faced the endless expanse of his property, the same chairs where they used to sit and plan their future together. You look good, Marcus said finally, because he didn't know how else to begin. Thank you. Jasmine's response was polite but guarded. You look tired. He was tired. Exhausted, actually. Running a business empire was demanding enough, but doing it while carrying the weight of regret and loneliness had worn him down more than he cared to admit. Why didn't you tell me? The question came out more accusingly than he intended. Jasmine turned to look at him, and he saw a flash of the fire that had first drawn him to her. Tell you what, Marcus? That I was pregnant with your children when you chose your family's money over our love? That I was carrying triplets while you let your father convince you that I was just a gold digger who would never fit into your world? The words hit him like physical blows because they were true. Every single accusation was justified. You could have called. You could have. Could have what? Jasmine's voice rose slightly. Could have come crawling back to beg you to choose your own children over your family's approval? Could have subjected my babies to a father who was ashamed of their mother? Marcus felt something break open inside his chest. I was never ashamed of you. Weren't you? Jasmine set down her water glass with more force than necessary. When your father said I was only with you for your money, you didn't defend me. When he said our children would be complications to your inheritance, you didn't fight for us. When he gave you that ultimatum, me or the family fortune, you chose the money. I thought I was protecting you, Marcus said weakly, but even he could hear how hollow the excuse sounded. You were protecting yourself, Jasmine replied. From having to stand up to your family. From having to choose between what was easy and what was right. I needed a partner, Marcus. Instead, I got a man who loved his family's approval more than he loved me. The sound of children's laughter drifted across the yard from the direction of the stables. Their children. His children, who had been living in the world for 4 years without him even knowing they existed. Where have you been? Marcus asked quietly. All this time, where did you go? San Antonio, mostly. I finished my nursing degree while I was pregnant. It wasn't easy, but I had help. Jasmine's voice softened slightly. My sister moved in with me when the babies were born. She's been incredible. Marcus remembered Jasmine's sister Monica, a fierce woman who had never particularly liked him even before everything fell apart. He couldn't imagine what she thought of him now. Are you with someone? The question burned his throat, but he had to know. Jasmine was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she might not answer. Finally, she shook her head. No. There hasn't been anyone serious. Hard to date when you're a single mother of triplets working your way through nursing school. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by guilt for feeling relieved. She had been struggling while he lived in luxury, raising their children alone while he convinced himself he was better off without the complications of love. Why are you here now? Marcus asked. After all this time, why bring them to me? Jasmine stared out at the horizon for a long moment. Because they started asking questions I couldn't answer. About their father. About why he wasn't around. And, because. She paused, seeming to gather courage. Because my mother is dying, and she made me promise that no matter what happened between us, your children have the right to know their father. The words hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. Jasmine's mother, Elena, had been more of a parent to Jasmine than her own father ever was. She was a woman of incredible strength and wisdom, and she had always been kind to Marcus during the brief time he was part of Jasmine's life. I'm so sorry, Marcus said, and he meant it. How long does she have? The doctors say maybe 6 months. She's been fighting cancer for 2 years, but it's spreading. Jasmine's voice cracked slightly. She wants to see them settled before she goes. She wants to know they'll have their father in their lives. Of course they will, Marcus said immediately. Whatever you need, whatever they need. I don't want your money, Marcus. Jasmine's voice was firm. I never wanted your money. I have a good job now, working at San Antonio General. We're doing fine financially. Then, what do you want? Jasmine turned to look at him directly, and Marcus felt the full force of her intelligent, determined gaze. I want you to be their father. Really be their father. Not just a weekend visitor or a check in the mail. They need stability, consistency, love. They need a dad who shows up. I want that too, Marcus said, and he was surprised by how much he meant it. I want to know them. I want to be part of their lives. It's not going to be easy, Jasmine warned. They don't know you. They're going to test you, push boundaries, have meltdowns. They're 4-year-olds, Marcus. They're not perfect little angels. Marcus almost smiled at that. I wouldn't expect them to be. The sound of approaching voices made them both look toward the stables. Diego was walking back with the 3 children, all of whom were talking excitedly about the horses they had met. Mama! Mama! Jade ran toward them, her face glowing with excitement. I rode a real horse. Well, Mr. Diego led me around, but I was really riding. The brown one is named Coco, Jaden announced. Like the drink, but it's a horse. Jordan, still shy but obviously thrilled, added quietly, the white one has a baby. Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years, pure, uncomplicated joy. Watching his children's excitement, seeing their personalities shine through their chatter, made him realize what an incredible gift Jasmine had just handed him. Thank you, Diego, Marcus called to his foreman. I think you've made some new friends. Diego grinned and tipped his hat. Anytime, boss. These kids are naturals around horses. As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon, Marcus realized that everything in his life had just changed. 5 years ago, he had chosen security over love, approval over authenticity, money over meaning. Today, he was being offered a second chance, not just with Jasmine, but with 3 little people who represented the best parts of both of them. The question now was whether he had learned enough in 5 years of loneliness to make different choices. Whether he had grown into the kind of man who deserved the gift of being their father. Looking at Jasmine as she knelt down to hug their children, Marcus made a silent promise to himself and to them. This time, he would choose love. This time, he would be the man they needed him to be. But, first, he had 5 years of mistakes to make up for, and 3 little hearts to earn the right to call him daddy. The next morning arrived with the kind of chaos Marcus had never experienced in his perfectly ordered life. At 6:30 sharp, he was awakened not by his usual alarm clock, but by the sound of small feet running down the hallway outside the guest wing where Jasmine and the children had spent the night. Marcus sat up in bed, momentarily disoriented. For 5 years, his mornings had followed the same routine: wake at 6, coffee while reviewing market reports, shower, dress, work. Today, his house was filled with the voices of children, his children, and he had no idea what came next. The night before, after much discussion, Jasmine had agreed to stay at the ranch for a few weeks. Not in his master bedroom, as Marcus had briefly hoped, but in the spacious guest wing that had its own kitchen and living area. It was a compromise that gave the children time to adjust to having a father while maintaining appropriate boundaries between Marcus and Jasmine. "But, I need you to understand something," Jasmine had said as they worked out the details. "This isn't about us getting back together. This is about giving our children the chance to know their father. Don't confuse the two." Her words had stung, but Marcus knew he deserved them. He had lost the right to her love when he chose his family's approval over their relationship. Now, his focus had to be on earning his children's trust and proving he could be the father they deserved. Marcus dressed quickly and headed toward the main kitchen, following the sound of voices and what appeared to be a minor catastrophe in progress. "Jade, no. You can't put syrup on scrambled eggs." That was Jaden's voice, filled with the kind of horror only a 4-year-old could muster over breakfast crimes. "I can too. I like syrup." Jade's response was defiant and loud. "Boys, help me find the napkins." Jasmine's voice cut through the chaos, calm but slightly strained. "Jordan, sweetie, please don't cry. We can clean up the juice." Marcus rounded the corner to find his kitchen transformed into what looked like a breakfast battlefield. There was orange juice spilled across the granite countertop, bits of scrambled eggs scattered on the floor, and Jade sitting at the breakfast bar with a plate of eggs thoroughly doused in maple syrup, grinning like she had just conquered the world. Jordan stood near the sink, tears streaming down his face as he stared at his empty cup, apparently the source of the orange juice disaster. Jaden was trying to help by wiping up the spill with what appeared to be an entire roll of paper towels. Jasmine stood in the middle of it all, wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, looking beautiful and overwhelmed and completely out of place in his sterile, rarely used kitchen. "Good morning," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice cheerful despite the chaos. All action stopped. 3 pairs of eyes, 2 brown, 1 hazel like their mother's, turned to stare at him. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then, Jade broke the silence. "Daddy! Look, I made my eggs sweet." She held up a forkful of syrup-drenched scrambled eggs like she was displaying a work of art. The word daddy hit Marcus like a physical force. He had wondered what it would feel like to hear one of his children call him that. He had imagined it would be emotional, meaningful, perhaps even magical. He hadn't expected it to happen while his daughter was committing breakfast sacrilege with maple syrup. "That's very creative, sweetheart," Marcus managed, moving into the kitchen. "How does it taste?" Jade took a big bite and chewed thoughtfully. Her face went through several expressions before she swallowed with obvious effort. "It's interesting," she said diplomatically. "It's gross," Jaden announced. "Mama, can I have different eggs?" "We're running low on eggs," Jasmine said apologetically to Marcus. "I should have asked before we started cooking. I wasn't thinking about your grocery situation." Marcus realized with some embarrassment that his kitchen was indeed nearly bare. He employed a housekeeper who came twice a week and a cook who prepared meals when he was entertaining business associates, but his day-to-day eating habits consisted mainly of takeout and restaurant meals. The refrigerator contained bottled water, leftover Chinese food, and a collection of condiments that might have been older than his relationship with Jasmine. "Don't worry about it," Marcus said quickly. "We can order breakfast from town, or..." He paused, struck by an idea. "Actually, why don't we go to town for breakfast? I know a great little diner." The children's faces lit up at the suggestion, but Jasmine looked hesitant. "Marcus, you don't have to entertain us," she said quietly. "You probably have work to do." The truth was, Marcus had a conference call with investors in Tokyo in an hour, followed by a meeting with his development team about a new resort project in Colorado. His assistant had been sending increasingly urgent text messages since 7 o'clock. But, looking at his children's hopeful faces, Marcus realized that his business empire could wait for one morning. "Work can wait," he said, pulling out his phone to reschedule his morning appointments. "Besides, I know the owner of the diner. She makes the best pancakes in 3 counties. 20 minutes later, they were piled into Marcus's large SUV, heading toward the small town of Cedar Creek. Marcus had specifically chosen this vehicle instead of his usual sports car or luxury sedan, thinking it would be more appropriate for transporting children. Jasmine sat in the front passenger seat, while the triplets were securely buckled into the back row, chattering excitedly about their first real outing with their newly discovered father. The drive to town gave Marcus his first real lesson in the realities of traveling with 4-year-olds. Jade announced every cow she saw, which was problematic since they were driving through prime Texas ranch country. Jaden wanted to know why the horses weren't wearing saddles, and could they stop to ask the horses their names? Jordan was carsick. "I should have warned you," Jasmine said quietly as they pulled over so Jordan could get some fresh air. "Car rides are always an adventure." Marcus knelt beside his son, rubbing small circles on his back as Jordan took deep breaths of the morning air. "Feel better, buddy?" Jordan nodded, then looked up at Marcus with serious dark eyes. "Are you really going to stay with us now?" The question cut straight to Marcus's heart. "I'm going to try my best to be here for you," he said carefully. "All of you? Promise?" Jordan's voice was small and hopeful and absolutely devastating. "I promise," Marcus said, and meant it more than any business deal he had ever closed. The diner, Maggie's Kitchen, was exactly the kind of place Marcus usually avoided, a small-town institution with mismatched furniture, faded checkered tablecloths, and the kind of atmosphere that said locals only. But, as they walked in, Marcus saw it through his children's eyes: friendly faces, the smell of bacon and fresh coffee, and endless possibilities for adventure. Maggie herself, a woman in her 60s who had known Marcus since he was smaller than his own children, came bustling over with a smile that faltered slightly when she saw Jasmine and the triplets. "Well, I'll be," Maggie said slowly, her gaze moving from Marcus to the children and back again. "Marcus Wellington, you've been keeping secrets." Marcus felt Jasmine stiffen beside him, and he remembered how unwelcome she had felt in this community 5 years ago. The truth was, Cedar Creek was a small, mostly white town where newcomers, especially newcomers who looked different, often faced subtle but persistent prejudice. "Maggie, I'd like you to meet my children," Marcus said firmly, his hand moving protectively to Jordan's shoulder. "Jaden, Jade, and Jordan. And you remember Jasmine." Maggie's expression softened as she looked at the children, who were staring around the diner with wide eyes. Whatever her personal opinions might be, Maggie had always had a soft spot for kids. "Well, aren't you 3 just beautiful?" she said warmly. "And hungry, I'll bet. We've got the best pancakes you've ever tasted." They were seated in a corner booth, with the children on one side and Marcus and Jasmine on the other. Marcus watched as his kids studied the menu with the intense concentration of tiny scholars, occasionally asking Jasmine to read words they didn't recognize. "Can I have chocolate chip pancakes?" Jade asked hopefully. "May I?" Jasmine corrected gently. "And, yes, you may. May I have bacon?" Jaden added. "Like, a lot of bacon?" "We'll see how much a lot turns out to be," Jasmine said with a smile. Jordan, still looking slightly pale from the car ride, requested plain toast and orange juice. Marcus made a mental note to ask Jasmine about motion sickness remedies for future trips. As they waited for their food, Marcus found himself studying his children's faces, trying to memorize every detail. Jaden had a small scar above his left eyebrow that Marcus wanted to know the story behind. Jade had their mother's laugh, bright and infectious. Jordan had a habit of twisting a lock of his hair when he was thinking, just like Marcus's younger brother used to do. "How did you choose their names?" Marcus asked quietly while the children were distracted by the vintage jukebox in the corner. "Jaden was the first name we discussed, remember?" Jasmine's voice was soft. "Back when we used to talk about having kids someday. You said if we ever had a son, you wanted to name him something strong but not too common." Marcus did remember. They had been lying in bed on a lazy Sunday morning, talking about their future together. The memory was bittersweet now, a reminder of all the dreams they had shared and lost. "Jordan was my grandfather's name," Jasmine continued. "He raised me after my father left. I wanted to honor him." "And, Jade?" Jasmine smiled. "She named herself, actually. When they were about 2, she decided she didn't like her original name and announced that she was Jade now. It stuck." "What was her original name?" "Hope." The word hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Hope, the thing Marcus had lost when Jasmine left, the thing she had carried with her when she discovered she was pregnant, the thing she had perhaps given up on when months passed without a word from him. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their food, which was met with enthusiasm from Jaden, cautious acceptance from Jordan, and absolute delight from Jade, who announced that these were the most beautiful pancakes in the whole world. Marcus watched his children eat, marveling at their different personalities. Jaden was methodical, cutting his pancakes into precise squares before eating them. Jade approached her food like a scientist, trying different combinations of flavors and announcing her findings. Jordan ate slowly, carefully, taking small bites and chewing thoughtfully. "They're so different," Marcus said wonderingly. "Night and day," Jasmine agreed. Even though they shared the same womb for 8 months, they came out with completely distinct personalities. "The doctor said it's common with multiples, but it still amazes me every day." As breakfast wound down, Marcus noticed that the diner had gradually filled with locals, many of whom were stealing curious glances at their table. He could see the wheels turning in their minds, putting together the pieces of a story that had been local gossip 5 years ago. Marcus Wellington, the richest man in the county, having breakfast with his black ex-girlfriend and 3 mixed-race children who looked exactly like him. He felt Jasmine noticed the attention too, saw her shoulders tense slightly as she became aware of the whispered conversations at nearby tables. "Let's head home," Marcus said quietly, signaling for the check. But, as they prepared to leave, an elderly man Marcus recognized as Earl Patterson, a local rancher, approached their table. Earl had always been friendly with Marcus's family, and Marcus steeled himself for what was coming. "Marcus," Earl said, tipping his worn cowboy hat. "Heard you were back in town. These your young ones?" "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, standing to shake Earl's hand. "My children." Earl looked down at the triplets, who were staring up at him with wide eyes. Then, he did something that surprised everyone, including Marcus. He knelt down to their level and smiled warmly. "Well, I'll tell you what," Earl said to the children. "Your daddy was about your age when he caught his first fish on my property. Meanest little catfish you ever saw, put up quite a fight." "Really?" Jaden's eyes lit up. "Did he fall in?" "Matter of fact, he did," Earl chuckled. "Right into the creek, boots and all. Your grandpa Wellington was madder than a wet hen." The children giggled at the image of their serious-looking father falling into a creek. Marcus felt some of the tension leave his shoulders as he realized that Earl wasn't here to cause trouble, but simply to be neighborly. "You folks are welcome to fish there anytime," Earl added, standing and addressing Marcus. "Kids ought to know how to catch their dinner." "Thank you, Earl. That's very kind." As they left the diner, Marcus reflected on the morning's revelations. His children were funny, curious, and more resilient than he had expected. Jasmine was an incredible mother, patient, loving, and protective without being overprotective. And his community, while not perfect, might be more accepting than either of them had anticipated. The drive home was quieter, with Jordan feeling better and all three children beginning to show signs of the mid-morning tiredness that apparently affected 4-year-olds like clockwork. "Can we see the horses again?" Jade asked sleepily as they pulled into the ranch driveway. "Of course," Marcus replied. "But maybe after a little rest?" "I'm not tired," Jordan protested, even as his eyelids drooped. Back at the house, Jasmine officially organized nap time for the children in the guest wing while Marcus retreated to his study to deal with the morning's missed calls and emails. But he found himself unable to concentrate on quarterly reports and development timelines. Instead, he kept thinking about small hands in his, the sound of his children's laughter, and the way it felt to be called daddy. His assistant called 3 times, his business partner in Dallas sent increasingly urgent texts, and his accountant left a voicemail about tax implications for a new acquisition. All of it felt strangely distant and unimportant. Marcus was reviewing contracts for a resort development in Aspen when a soft knock interrupted his concentration. He looked up to see Jordan standing in the doorway of his study, looking small and uncertain. "Hey there, buddy. What's up?" "Mama said you were working," Jordan said quietly. "But I had a question." Marcus immediately closed his laptop and gave Jordan his full attention. "What's your question?" Jordan stepped into the study, his eyes wide as he took in the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the massive desk, and the various business awards displayed on the walls. "Are you really rich?" Jordan asked with the blunt honesty that only children possess. Marcus considered how to answer that question. "Yes, I suppose I am." "Does that bother you?" Jordan shook his head. "Mama said rich people sometimes think they're better than other people." "But you don't seem like that." The innocence of the statement hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. Here was his 4-year-old son, already aware of class differences and social prejudices, trying to figure out whether his newfound father was a good person or not. "Your mama is very smart," Marcus said carefully. "And she's right that some people with money think they're better than others. But having money doesn't make someone better or worse than anyone else. It's what you do with it that matters." Jordan nodded seriously, processing this information. "What do you do with yours?" It was a simple question that Marcus realized he had never really thought about. What did he do with his wealth? He had built a business empire, acquired properties, invested in markets around the world. But what was the purpose of it all? "Well," Marcus said slowly, "I've been pretty focused on making more money. But now that I have you and Jade in my life, I'm thinking maybe I should focus on different things." "More important things? Like what?" Marcus looked at his son's earnest face and felt something shift inside his chest. "Like making sure you and your brother and sister have everything you need to be happy and healthy. Like helping other kids who might not have as much as we do. Like using the money to make good things happen instead of just making more money." Jordan climbed up into one of the leather chairs in front of Marcus's desk, his short legs swinging as he got comfortable. "Can I help?" he asked simply. "Help with what?" "Making good things happen." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes as he looked at this beautiful, thoughtful little boy who wanted to help make the world better. "Yes," he said quietly. "I would love your help. And Jade's too." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, father and son sharing the kind of quiet understanding that Marcus had never experienced with his own father. "Jordan?" Marcus said finally. "Would you like to see something special?" Jordan nodded eagerly. Marcus led him to a wall safe hidden behind one of his bookshelves. Inside, along with important documents and emergency cash, was a small wooden box that he hadn't opened in years. "This belonged to my grandfather," Marcus explained as he carefully lifted out an antique pocket watch. "He gave it to me when I was about your age." Jordan's eyes widened as Marcus opened the watch to reveal the intricate mechanism inside. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "My grandfather told me that time is the most valuable thing we have," Marcus said, remembering the old man's words. "He said that money can be earned and lost and earned again, but time only goes in one direction. The question is what we choose to do with the time we have." What are you going to do with your time now? Sometimes life has a way of bringing the past crashing into the present like a freight train you never saw coming. For Marcus Wellington, the third richest man in Texas, that moment arrived on a dusty Tuesday afternoon when three little faces peered through his ranch gate, faces that mirrored his own in ways that made his heart stop. 5 years ago, he had let pride destroy the best thing that ever happened to him. Today, those consequences stood 3 feet tall, asking for their daddy in voices that sounded just like his own childhood recordings. This is the story of a man who thought money could buy him everything, only to discover that the most precious things in life can't be purchased, they can only be earned through love, sacrifice, and the courage to admit when you've been terribly, terribly wrong. What happens when the woman you pushed away returns not just to haunt your memories, but to challenge everything you thought you knew about family, forgiveness, and what it truly means to be wealthy? Get ready for a journey that will make you question everything you believe about second chances.